Jamarl Thomas, and welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So, got a question. Did you know that the United States is the richest country in the history of the world? Did you also know that, if I'm remembering this stat correctly, over the last 20 years, we've established more wealth than at any other time in human history, and I believe combined. That's pretty amazing. Did you also know that juxtaposed against such wealth and prosperity, 50% of the country is living in poverty? Did you know that 95% of the 10 million jobs Obama created were either part-time or contract? Did you also know, adding to the last stat, that 95% of the wealth created also went to the top 1%? It's to the point where 60% of the country, if there was an emergency car repair or something, wouldn't be able to scrounge together $600. Flat wages, or wages have been flat for the past 40 years. But to add insult to injury on that one, did you know that productivity over the past 40 years has spiked by like 80%? Even though wages, real wages, have stayed flat. Where on earth did all that surplus go? Because understand the principle. A company says, okay, I'm going to do this particular business, whatever that business is. I'm going to take a product or service, I'm going to package it, I'm going to give it to one of my customers. That customer is going to pay me for that service. So there's a relationship, or a clear relationship, between the productivity and the production with the surplus that's created on the back end. For the most part, they took that money and put it in their pockets. Whether it was paying dividends, whether it was reinvesting into the stock market, whether it was paying for automation so they could get rid of that worker, whether it's shipping their job abroad. That company is going to take that money and do what it needs to do to make additional money. Their job, they're machines. Their job is to make as much profit, to maximize profit. Americans, for the most part, once they realized their wages weren't going up, they still were accustomed to a particular lifestyle. Meaning, for the most part, they behaved as if there had not been a shift. And they started to rely on credit as opposed to actual funds that they had themselves. They didn't have it. Their wages wasn't given it to them. The wages were remaining flat, meaning they weren't in a situation where they were going to ever recoup that money back, at least not under this model. So they went into debt. And whether that's school loans, it's putting $50,000 on the back of a 21-year-old. Whether it's a car note, whether it's a house loan, whether it's medical bills, you name it. We went headlong into debt to pay for things that as a society we could have came together and figured out how to do it. We didn't do that. We're rugged individualists. And we want the freedom to be in significant amounts of debt. So, adding to that, I guess, grim picture that I've just painted, water could be unaffordable for millions of Americans. This was a study that was recently done. The people who did this study, the study was funded by the National Science Foundation and conducted by Michigan State University researchers. Now, they've come to the conclusion that water prices have been going up. And part of this has been crumbling infrastructure, part of this is modernizing, whatever. And oddly enough, part of it was even global warming or climate change, apparently. But the study found that people were insecure with regards to water because, again, their wages are already suppressed and they're getting more and more expenditures in regards to living in a modern society. And this has just been added as another expenditure. or at the very least it's been building as another expenditure. And look, I can speak from personal experience on this. Our water bill has been going up from the time we were at the apartment to the time we got to this place. So according to the study published this month in Plus One Journal, more than 1/3 of U.S. households could struggle to pay for water within the next 5 years. Now, the EPA has a standard called water poverty, which means that a certain percentage of water should not exceed, or for you to get water, it should not exceed a certain amount of money in your budget. So in this case, where's it? If that water bill figure exceeded the Environmental Protection Agency's recommendation that a household water and wastewater spending should make up no more than 4.5% of a household income, meaning, look, a person shouldn't have to spend more than 4.5% of their money just to get clean water. Again, that's somewhat sensible. You would think that as a society we can come together and make a decision on how we can supply our residents with clean water. They call this water poverty. So the study found that an estimated 13.8 million U.S. households, 11.9% of all homes, are already facing this reality. Martin Luther King, he gave this really amazing speech. And the speech essentially was his turning against the Vietnam War. He had stayed silent on it. And he came out with this just moral authority. And look, I am a sucker for moral authority. If you show me a little moral authority, you can pretty much have your way with me. And King has it in spades. And in the speech, he's essentially making reference to the Vietnam War. And he's making reference to LBJ and the promises of the Democratic Party. And he made the simple, stinging, and pretty accurate point that the great society that LBJ, FDR, all these guys envisioned, cracked its head on Vietnam. And King made this amazing point. A country that believes it's more important to spend money on bombs and tools to kill other people, to kill wide swaths of people. A government that thinks it's okay to spend money on that, or okay to spend exorbitant amounts of money on that, while people in the country starve, while they lack opportunities, while the infrastructure of the country is crumbling. We are $20 trillion in debt. They've just raised the debt limit by another $9 trillion. We have nothing to show for that money. Infrastructures are crumbling, bridges are crumbling, water is becoming a difficult thing to get now, or at the very least, people are becoming more and more insecure in regards to their ability to procure water. We spend over $1 trillion a year on the military. But we don't have enough to make sure that people cover their water. You know, in Michigan, they're still dealing with the lead in their water. Still. When those people asked Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, what would you do as president to fix this shit? We shouldn't have to drink lead water in a country that's the most prosperous in the history of the world. Why are we drinking lead water? Why are we bathing in lead water? Why is my kid potentially going to get cancer from drinking that lead water? Certainly this is off. This is not necessarily the way it should work. So somebody did critique the study. And the person who critiqued the study made the point that, well, wait a minute, they didn't necessarily use how much water costs in those specific communities. They were using an aggregate of data in order to kind of mine that data to come up with certain conclusions. But even with that critique, when they asked the guy if the findings were legit, he makes the point. He says, this is something we all need to look at, irrespective of what side of the political spectrum you're on. So he makes the point, his conclusion is, well, yeah, there is a problem. We don't necessarily know what those numbers are. But clearly you can look at the tenor of the economy. You can look at wages. You can look at how they've stagnated. You can look at the other expenses that people need to pay now that they didn't necessarily have maybe 50 years ago. Empirically, you can look at it. Intuitively, you can even look at it and see that, yeah, this is going to be a growing problem. Should that be a growing problem, getting water to people when we're spending $1 trillion on the military? Are you kidding me? That is so morally depraved. Instead of building up systems within the country itself, instead of making sure that the people in the country are okay, to give priority to people over profits, that's not what takes place. They literally believe that it's more right to spend money dropping munitions on foreign countries than it is to make sure that the people in this country have food, clothing, can get access to medical care, can access to school, all of these things without going completely into debt just to become an actualized person. This happened under a Democratic president in the same way it happened under a Republican president. It's not about the parties. It's about the model itself. I keep harping on this. A lot of this has to do with the capitalistic model. Look, in regards to spending all that money on the military, you're going to end up spending money one way or the other. Either you can spend it to help people or you can spend it to hurt people. In both situations, you're trying to accomplish the same ends. Meaning, let's take it to just domestic policy. I could drop a huge amount of money into making sure education is strong, making sure that kids have access to higher education, making sure kids have access to activities that they want to do, and more importantly, making sure that they have access to a decent job market if you're going to stay with this particular model of society. Make sure that government helps them in the way that they can essentially become more self-actualized, whether that's getting a degree, whether that's getting health care if they need it, whatever those things are. I'm not saying let government take over those people's lives or our lives. All I'm saying is, as a society, we can make the decisions on things that as a society we want to come together to support, because dealing with those things as individuals is too extreme. Water should be one of those things. Every American should be able to get clean water. Is that now in contention? I mean, shit, man. I met this guy when I was in India. He was like a professor or something. And he was telling me he was there to give a speech about water. Many of the people in India did not necessarily have access to clean water, so we use water filtration units. But I'm saying India is in deep poverty. We're not. We should not have this situation. And there should not be a situation where killing has a higher priority to make sure that the people of the country are secure. Whether that's with water, medicine, education, however you want to classify it. Alright, like I said, this is probably going to be one of the most important stories from my standpoint, because the basics of life should be there. We should not bring a kid into this world if we can't necessarily, as a society, decide, let's take care of that kid. But in our day and age, it is perfectly okay to have somebody with huge amounts of wealth and somebody else who's drinking water that's laced with lead. It's absolutely amazing. Alright guys, thank you.